Welcome to the Aging Well podcast, where we explore the strategies, tools, and insights to help you live a vibrant and healthy life no matter your age. Today, we are honored to have Dr. Karl Knopf, a trailblazer in the health and fitness industry with an inspiring 50-year career dedicated to empowering older adults and individuals with disabilities. Dr. Knopf has worn many hats throughout his career: personal trainer, therapist, professor, consultant, and author. He has written over 20 fitness books, including his latest, The Strength Training Bible for Seniors, the ultimate fitness guide for the rest of your life. This essential resource offers seniors practical and adaptable exercises for building strength, improving mobility, and maintaining independence. Dr. Knopf's passion for helping older adults live their best lives goes beyond the gym. He is the founder of the Fitness Educators of Older Adults Association, a former director at the International Sports Science Association, and an advisor for PBS's Sit and Be Fit. In this episode, Dr. Knopf will share why strength training is the cornerstone of healthy aging, the myths that hold many seniors back from exercise, and how to start and sustain a fitness routine that works for your body. If you've ever thought it too late to begin a strength training program or wondered how to do it safely, this conversation will inspire and equip you to take the first step and age well. Dr. Knopf, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. Let's have you just start off by telling our listeners and our viewers a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to focus your career on the fitness for older adults and people with disabilities.
Well, Jeff, that's interesting. I've always been interested in exercise and fitness. And then when I went to school, I was fortunate enough to get a position at Foothill College. And where Foothill is located is in the mid-peninsula in the San Francisco Bay Area. And the demographics lended itself to a lot of older adults who were in the community. And we also were positioned behind the VA hospital. So in their mission statement, we went out to the community. Rather than bringing the students to the campus, we went out and served the older adults within the community sites out in the community and the VA. And so that lended itself to blending with my interests and serving the needs of the community and the college.
So I know for myself, my career has evolved a lot over the last 30 years. How has your approach to senior fitness evolved over your 50-year career?
You know, it's interesting you say that, Jeff, because I don't think it has. And the reason I say that, I think I was out of the box 50 years ago. Because, and if you're too young to remember, but most people were afraid that lifting weights and exercise was taboo for older people, that if they exercised hard, they would break. And so I just remember, I'll tell you a quick story if we have time. I was invited to be an advisor on this committee to get older adults at the VA hospital walking. Now, I was surrounded by experts who had pedigrees longer than you can imagine. And I was naive enough to say, before you get people walking, we got to get them strong enough that they can stand up and have the balance to walk. Well, obviously, I wasn't invited back because that wasn't the answer they wanted to hear. But so my philosophy stayed the same. It's just interesting that now, as you know, as a professor, we now know that exercise is medicine. And before we used to, and then that's when I started around the Kenneth Cooper period of time. And then they started to see, wow, if we start doing aerobic exercise, we can improve the chances of improving cardiovascular disease. And so now it's all pretty mainstream. But back then, it was pretty radical to do that. And my master's thesis, I was at the VA at the time, I looked at the benefits of strength training for paraplegics and spinal cord injuries. Now, that was not considered the right thing to do. It was supposed to be range of motion, get them up in a standing frame, prepare them for a life of living in a wheelchair. And we got good results. And now it was just a master's thesis, so it was no great publication. And then when I went on to get my doctorate, my doctoral dissertation, again, was at the VA. We looked at the benefits of exercise and strength training for post-traumatic head injury. Now, this was before the NFL was looking at head trauma and all that. So a lot of these things that I thought about and tried were done 50 years ago, and now they're pretty mainstream. So it's funny when I go to conferences and hear speakers talking about all the benefits, I smile at myself and say, well, we've been there, done that, but I'm glad it's gone mainstream and acceptable now.
Yeah, I personally think that we have been really slow and poor at jumping on the strength training bandwagon in exercise science. I mean, I did my master's in 1986. And I always tell my students now, it's like back then the emphasis was on corporate fitness, on cardiac rehab, and it was cardio. We were focused on a high carbohydrate, low fat diet, and we didn't emphasize strength. And there was a number of years ago, I went to the American College of Sports Medicine conference, and they were honoring a bunch of the senior fellows. And I'm looking around at these guys and like, they're kyphotic, they're moving slow, they looked really frail. These guys are only in their 80s. And said, I don't want to look like that in my 80s. And I realized that these were the ones that really promoted much more of the cardiovascular exercise, which we know that, if you're only doing cardio, you're ultimately going to lose muscle mass over time. And then it's just going to be this constant spiral downwards that you're not going to be able to maintain that level of activity because you don't have the strength. And so there were very few people in that time like yourself that were promoting strength training. So I applaud you for being one of the leaders in actually talking about strength training when nobody else was.
It's interesting you say that because in the little community where I live, they have a 10K race from the Santa Cruz Wharf to the Capitola Village. And these runners of all ages, they look fabulous from the waist down. They got these great legs, but their upper bodies look like they're starving to death and they're kyphotic and so forth. So there has to be balance between. You've got to work the upper body and so forth. And as you said, back in the 70s, it was all about aerobic exercise. And if people lifted weights, you were going to turn into Arnold Schwarzenegger. You were going to get muscle bound. And coaches didn't want their athletes lifting weights because they were going to lose flexibility and range of motion. So it's, as you know, it's all about specificity of training and having a balanced program between stretching, strengthening, and so forth. I always joke, kind of a joke because I am a goofy guy, days without progressive resistive exercise makes you weak. Now you got to see that in writing to see how a week without strength training makes you weak. So you can play on words.
I got the pun. That's good.
Thank you.
So why is strength training particularly important for older adults?
You as an expert in the area, know that normal aging, they say we age about 2% of our strength starting in our 30s and so forth. And I'm not good at math, but you multiply that over 40 years, you've lost a significant amount of strength, enough loss of strength that your balance is impaired, your ability to do activities of daily living are minimized, and you're not strong enough to stand or walk. Whereas someone like yourself who exercises daily, you only lose about 0.5% of strength. So you can see over a lifetime, that's the difference between being a frail elderly person versus a strong older adult who can function independently and do their activities daily. Because again, I've worked out in the field with older adults for 40, 50 years. And they always were saying, gosh, I need to move, Carl. My house is getting too big. And at that point, I had 2 small kids. And I go, well, tell me what it takes to get your house bigger. And the reality was that the house that was perfect for them in their 40s, now the steps are too high, the chairs are too low, the yard is too big. And if you keep your exercise fitness up, you can minimize that challenge.
Yeah, I think it's all about maintenance. But how does it benefit areas like bone health, balance, and cognitive function?
Well, it's interesting. This cognitive function has really become the hot button right now. They're talking about how exercise and strength training really can help increase the blood flow to the brain and so forth. But it's pretty well established that bone health, by increasing the bone density by lifting weights, can improve bone density. But what I keep thinking, and sometimes we're talking to the wrong end of the spectrum, Jeff. Maybe what we should be talking to is young kids, because the bones you build when you're under 20 are the bones you're going to have to live on when you're 70 and 80. So we've got to do more to get young people doing strength training, get off the video games, get out and run. When you and I were kids, we went out and climbed trees and did a lot of that. We didn't need a designed fitness program, but we've got to get their leg strength up for older people to reduce their falls.
Yeah, I've long taught my female students, well, all my students, but that the importance for weight-bearing exercise and strengthening exercises for females prior to the first menses is so important for preventing osteoporosis. And now I'm starting to lean toward, guys, we're going to start to see more osteoporosis in aging males because we're not doing as much activity. And guys need to be moving more and doing more weight-bearing and weight training exercise.
I agree with you 100%. Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. But what are some of the biggest misconceptions about seniors and strength training?
Well, again, remember, I've been around for a long time, and at that point, people were afraid it was too dangerous. Oh, we can't have older adult people because if they start lifting weights, their bones are going to break in the gym and so forth. Or they're going to become, as we said earlier, get muscle bound and look distorted and look for and get hurt. So, or it's too late. Gosh, I wish you would have told me this 30 years ago. I would have started exercising. So, and oh, I need a gym. I need a personal trainer. And basically, as you and I both agree, that it can be done with push-ups, sit to stands, exercise bands, dumbbell weights, etc. If I have time, I'd like to share a quick little story, if you don't mind.
Sure, we got plenty of time.
I was invited to come to this lady's house, and she was an older cantankerous gal. She was probably 80 at the time, which I thought was old then, but now as I'm getting closer, it's pretty young. And she goes, I need to go to Europe to see my son graduate from college. And I said, okay. She goes, but I don't want to be pushed through the airport in a wheelchair. I don't want to use a walker. I want to be able to function independently. I want to go up to the gangway by myself. So we started, and this is, again, I'm dating myself. There was a magazine called the Reader's Digest, and it was a very small little magazine. And we started lifting just the Reader's Digest. Then we worked over a 6 month, a year period of time. She was strong enough to go through the airport on her own. She went from Reader's Digest to War and Peace, and without any fancy gym membership. So it really is just when is the best time to start exercising? Probably yesterday.
That's true.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I actually had a client once who it was shortly after the remember the tough study that looked at weight training in senior living centers and showed that there was a significant decrease in dependence upon walking devices and canes and everything. And so this gentleman was turning 84. So for his 84th birthday, he gifted himself a personal trainer. And his goal was to not walk without a cane. Yeah. And I love telling that story to my students because this guy shows up, he's got brown loafers on, dark blue socks, Bermuda shorts, polo shorts, or shirt, his thick horn rim glasses. Yeah. And, just the key description of an 80-plus-year-old person, although I'm hoping that 80 now looks a lot different than it did 30 years ago. But I mean, we worked pretty hard on him, and he, within about 3 months, was just carrying his cane, walking a little bit faster. I mean, originally when he walked into the gym, he walked like Tim Conway. You remember Tim Conway?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah. And so I love telling my students that because he was a perfect example of how it's never too late to start.
Jeff, since you work with undergraduate students, I read one time an experiment this professor did with his students. And he took a picture of older adult swimmers, runners, people who had lifted weights. And it was asked them to say, who looks the oldest and identify the ages. And it was interesting that most of the students found that those who had lifted weights looked more youthful than those even that were runners and swimmers. Because, swimmers, bless their heart, and I swim all the time, is they start to develop that hunched over forward shoulder because they never do anything to work the antagonistic muscles. And I think Joseph Pilates said it better than I could, but he said you should stretch what is tight and strengthen what is lax. And that's when you later may ask, well, what's the best program for an older adult? Is look at where your deficits are. And most of us don't. I mean, most of us gravitate towards, hey, I love doing bench press, and I'm going to do 17 sets of bench press. I'm not going to do any back exercise. So it's really developing a program that has a balanced approach, working the tight muscles and working agonist and antagonistic muscles.
So how do you address this fear that strength training is too dangerous or too intense for older individuals?
Now, my approach is different than many personal trainers because, again, I worked at a college and everybody had to go get a medical clearance before they exercise. And I always think that sometimes personal trainers overstretch their expertise. So I would always say before we start, you need to go and get a medical approval and find out what areas we need to work at. And if it was outside my scope of practice, I would say, gosh, maybe you need to see a physical therapist. And that too often I see now that personal trainers and physical therapists are in conflict. They're competing for the same client. And why not have a symbiotic relationship? Well, you're not ready for a personal trainer yet. Go to physical therapy, get some prescriptive exercises, bring them to me. We will work on a daily basis or a weekly basis because you don't want people to get hurt. Sudden death is not really good for your client base.
No.
So always get a medical approval. And then fear. A lot of my students who had chronic conditions, they say, Karl, I'm managing right now. You don't know what it's like to have my condition. And then they're afraid that if I do anything else, I'm going to get hurt. I won't be able to take care of my kids. I won't be able to manage my household. So, fear is a big thing. The other thing is start slow. I'm sure you as an exercise physiologist know that a lot of times we're told, hey, do a 1 rep max and then work at a percentage of that for your strength training. I'm just on the side of I'd rather err on the side of caution. That might hurt somebody. So why not just start at the very lightest weight, teach them form, teach them good posture, and then start the lightest weight. When you can do 10 to 12 repetitions, now we'll increase the load. Can I share another goofy story?
Sure.
Okay. I had this one client, and I'm to blame too. I just got a Labrador Retriever, which was 12 pounds when I bought it. Now it's about 90 pounds. So it's like, what was I thinking, right? So this guy, who could be me too, started lifting his little 12-pound puppy every day. And he fed the dog. And every day the dog went from 12 pounds to 13 pounds to 18 pounds till finally it's 90 pounds. But he kept practicing. So as the dog got bigger and heavier, his muscles adapted to that change. And that's my philosophy. Start light and work up to the skill set and improve.
Yeah, that's that old legend of Milo of Crete, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Carried the calf on his back.
Yes.
I used to joke with my son when he was born. I'd be carrying him every day, and I tried to carry him every day as long as he would permit me, and that was probably by about early middle school. But at that point, he's probably at least 100 pounds at that point.
Yeah.
Now he's about 200 pounds, and I think I know I can still carry him.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, because I can actually. I think I could still. I still can maybe out squat him with the Zercher squat.
Oh, wonderful.
So keep working on that. So what advice would you give to someone who has never worked out before but wants to start training later in life, other than going back in time?
Yeah. Just to be redundant, always get a medical clearance. Find out, a lot of us as we get older, who may be like myself, who exercised all my life, and now my bones and joints are paying the price. So, make sure that there's nothing that you're going to do that's going to exacerbate your existing condition. Because if you get hurt, then you're going to drop out. So there was a lady at Stanford when we did some work together, and I think she said it very well. Look at the 2-hour rule. How do you feel 2 hours post-exercise? If you're hurting, reevaluate what you did. Maybe take a day off, but don't quit. Because too often, okay, I tried this. My New Year's resolution was to lift weights, and now I'm hurting. I never hurt so much before, and they quit. So you just have to back up. Seek professional trainer or a personal trainer who understands older adults. The other concern I have is a lot of personal trainers think one size fits all. I mean, let's pretend you're an older person. You could do a lot more than your peer that is not fit. So, but the personal trainer has gone to a workshop and said, this is what you do with older adults, and they have a one size fits all base. And if you can, I told my students that if you can adapt and individualize, then you shouldn't be working with older adults. Everyone is unique. And I think the problem now that I look on Facebook, and every movie star or celebrity is in their bikini and they look fabulous at 50. Well, so everybody thinks that's the model they have to follow. That's the program that they're going to follow. And it has to be individualized and modified, because if they need to understand that, start with a goal. And I think, as you know, and we teach our students, you have a goal, but then you have to have objectives to get to that goal. And maybe ideally it's 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps, but maybe it's right at the beginning, it's 1 set of 3 to 5 reps at a comfortable load. And I think maybe later we can talk about controversial exercise that maybe people should avoid. But make sure you're looking at all the major muscle groups of the body. Because, again, if you have a young son, and maybe he's more enlightened than most young men, but you go into the gym, what is every guy in the world doing? They're doing bench press.
Bench press and arm curls.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it has to be a balanced program. And if we have time, can we basically talk a little bit about controversial exercises?
Sure. We can talk about that now. What do you think are some of the most controversial exercises when it comes to older adults?
And you could almost extrapolate this to young people too. But some people, I've gone to some workshops, they call them dangerous exercises, contraindicated exercise. I call them controversial because you could banter back and forth the pros and the cons of them. But leg curls, lying on a machine with your back on your stomach and doing leg curls could maybe cause a muscle imbalance, maybe cause you to arch your back and so forth. Back hyperextensions on that machine that you can lay down and arch your back. Even leg extensions with heavy weights may not be the thing. Now, you can do leg extensions or quad settings to strengthen the quads, but doing heavy leg extensions, and as you, at a college, you see these, and I'm saying guys, I shouldn't, but they're doing the leg extensions with 150 pounds and they're arching their back, they're swinging, and again, what is that doing? For all of us that want to have a slim waist, how many of us have done side bends with weights in each hand only to find that build up our external obliques and now we can't get rid of it? Our waist size got bigger and so forth. Bent over row, I know that's a real popular exercise, but it should be done with some thought. Lat pulls, where you're pulling the bar behind your head. Press behind the neck, military press. Ab machines, doing crunches on the ab machine, maybe better to do a core exercise on the ground. And that pec machine can easily tear out some rotator cuff problems. So any exercise, machines aren't designed for everybody. Because I think they said that the typical, let's say, Nautilus machine was designed for the person between 5'6" and 5'11". So if you're bigger than that or you're lighter than that getting the biomechanics on that can really set yourself up for injury. So I'm a fan of just going back to functional exercises. So that's not going to go over big, but that's what I'm a fan of.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of using the term functional exercise because to me, all exercise should be functional. And it's really, how are we applying the exercise? I tend to stick to what I call like the basic five, a squat type of movement, a hip hinge, a horizontal pressing exercise, not necessarily the bench press, an overhead press or something similar to that, and then a pulling exercise. And really, it should be six because there's probably the horizontal pull versus a vertical pull. But doing the exercises that are appropriate for the individual.
Right.
I've seen different articles and YouTube. There's one YouTube video that we did an episode on where he talked about 5 exercises you should not do over the age of 50. And said, well, how do you define not doing over the age of 50? Because I'm over 50 and I can do those quite well. There's people that are under 40 that probably should not be doing those exercises. So it's really a matter of, and you brought up the principle of individuality, and I would say that a student who can't apply that principle of individuality should not be a trainer, period. But I think that's one of the principles that's not applied enough in our textbooks. I've seen very few exercise science textbooks that mention the principle of individuality. We talk specificity, overload, progression, and all those, but we never talk about how everybody is individualized. And I would agree, leg extension, leg curl, those types of exercises are probably not even effective, let alone the risk of them being unsafe. You're better off doing something that is a much more, and I will use the word functional exercise, because how often we really just sit there bending our knees, we're doing other movements in the process. And so I think a lot of it is looking at the individual, what they're capable of doing, and that technique is like the primary thing. You talked about starting with the Labrador puppy and building up to the full grown lab. I think we have to do that with the exercises, that we cannot progress beyond. Once you know and understand the basic technique, then we can move on to the next thing. But if you can't do this in good technique, forget about it.
Yeah, and how many of us, it was more about how much arm curl can I do? Oh, I'm looking good. I can do a 1-arm curl with 110 pounds, and I'm jerking it away. But I have to laugh. I agree with you about functional exercise because it's a big fad now. And when I go and I see gyms, people turning over truck tires and throwing the ropes. Now, I struggled going through school because I didn't have any money, so I did every manual labor job in the world. I don't want to go back to lifting tires and pushing them and pulling ropes and so forth. But I agree with you. When you talk about functional, what I think we should think about is making functional fun. FUN. So if it's not fun, I'm not going to do it. It's going to be drudgery. And so And the other problem, as a college professor, maybe you can start the. And I was on a panel to evaluate a test. They were asking questions that were so far above my head, I had no idea what these people were talking about. But then there's no practical application. So these people are very smart and they don't understand. And again, I had a student who was a chief of surgery at Stanford, and he goes, we get some of the brightest people in the world, but we never look at how is their hand dexterity. Can they operate? Can they manipulate a tool in? So, I mean, that's what I think we need to blend with our teaching of personal trainers, blend theory with practice.
Yep.
And so that they know how to interact, because some of them have no interpersonal skills. I watch them when I go to the gym. They put the guy on or gal on the machine. They're over there looking at their phone. I'm going, what's personal about a personal trainer? If I just sit on them, tell them to sit on the machine and do 10 reps. So I hope we move to that direction so we can have a really respected profession.
Yeah. So, how can older adults avoid some of these common injuries? I mean, you've detailed out some exercises that can avoid injury, but what else can they do to avoid some of the common injuries when starting a new workout program?
I think that, as you said, they've got to be careful. Listen to your body and heed what it says. That's probably I think what great philosopher, physician said, physician, heal thyself. So look at, okay, if that's not feeling right, then can you, as my personal trainer, give me an alternative exercise if something hurts. So the other thing, if you watch enough videos at night, you got to avoid the fads. There's always some new fad that's going to make you fitter, stronger, better, and avoid overdoing it. Muscle strains, does it exacerbate your joint issues? If you do too much incorrectly, sudden death can occur. So just be careful of the knees, the low back, and the shoulders. Those are kind of areas that are predisposed to injury if you don't train smart. And I always try to tell students, train smart, not hard. And I guess as someone who's exercised all my life, I've done everything wrong, and I now am paying the price for it. So, to think about, and I'm a big fan of cross training. When I first hurt my back, I'm a generation of the Kenneth Cooper. So, like for my 30th birthday, I ran 30 miles, and then I blew out a disc and so forth. I started beginning to believe that you should cross train. Cross train maybe one or 2 days a week. You do aerobics. Monday you do water exercise. It's just so you have a balanced program and you don't overdo it and alternate your exercise. And again, I've seen personal trainers they have the same program for everybody, and that you stay on this program for 6 months and never give them any alternates of chaining. Okay, we've done arm curls, maybe we can do some other kind of exercise.
Yeah, that periodization principle needs to be taught in more exercise science programs, I think.
I agree with you.
And I think sometimes we tend to overemphasize periodization, not overemphasize, but we emphasize periodization for athletes, but we don't consider it for the more sedentary individual, the older adult, the non-athlete. And they need to periodize too.
Oh, exactly. Because if you spend time in the gym, and I'm probably just as guilty as everybody else. I did the same workout for 10 years, I had my little routine, went in, and got it done. And I think you bring up a good point too, is you don't really need equipment or, you don't have to have a gym membership. You can do your sit to stands. You can do some wall push-ups. You can do some knee push-ups, exercise bands. Some of my other books, I have one on band exercises and kettlebells. And so there's a lot of ways to do variation. And, water exercise, as someone who has orthopedic issues, I am a big fan of water exercise. And then you can walk and bike and so forth. So there's a lot of things you can do if you don't want to belong to a gym, because a lot of people are intimidated to belong to a gym.
There's how you can do at home too, with a home gym as well. Are there any simple exercises that you would recommend for seniors to do at home with little or no equipment?
Well, as I said, I like sit to stands, sitting in a chair. And again, you're too young, but now that I'm a Medicare client, it was interesting because Jessie Jones, and maybe your students can look at Jessie Jones. She developed a fitness test for older adults. And Roberta Recchi, they were down at Cal State Fullerton. And some of those tests could be good exercise. They're sitting in a chair, reaching to touch your toes. Sit to stands. Can you get up and go 8 feet and turn around? How long does it take? So I'm a big fan. And after COVID, I decided I better not go to the gym anymore. That was it, because they closed all the gyms in California. So I bought this little machine that's attached to the door, and it's bands, it's exercise bands. And so I can do all the things that you could do in a gym on these bands. So again, for a cost of $100, I can do lat pulls, I can do what you call them horizontal presses, arm curls, and so forth, without any big investment. And again, I do have to laugh. You're making me laugh, because when I was a therapist at the VA, I would go to each of the guys, and there was a VA men there, and this predates exercise bands. So my job was to go to their little bed, and they sure didn't want to see me come walking in after you just had a minor spinal cord injury. And we used surgical tubing. So we used surgical tubing before there was exercise bands, and we would attach it to the bed and do all kinds of exercises. Again, I really can't believe that anybody's too disabled or too frail they can't do anything.
Yeah, and even if you have somebody that can work with you, there's that manual resistance as well. You can
Oh,
just
excellent.
push
Yeah.
against somebody.
And again, I love talking to young people like you, because I like the historian.
Young people like me.
But there used to be
Make you feel good.
a guy named Charles Atlas. And I remember I read the comic book, and in the back was Charles Atlas. He got pushed with sand in his face, and then he started. And again, it was just dynamic tension. It was just like, okay, I'm just gonna. And I was such a good high school student. I'd be doing my dynamic tension when the teacher was teaching me algebra. Push up against the bottom of the desk. How hard could you do it? Push your hands together. So again, it can be manual resistance. It can be isometric, and so forth. There's a lot of things you can do to go start from 0 to 60.
So what should personal trainers and fitness instructors know about working with senior adults?
Well, you said
clients?
it perfectly. You said it perfectly. If you can't individualize and adapt and listen to it, do an intake form. Hey, what are you interested in? What's your goal? If someone hates getting on the ground to do push-ups, then you look at maybe what option can I get that same muscle group engaged without putting someone on the floor. So again, one size does not fit all. As you said, there are some 50-year-olds like yourself that are in great shape. There's others that can barely walk to the end of the street. So individualize, adapt. One of the things I guess I tried to do was be a motivator, because people come and say, well, gosh, it's too late. I can't do it. I'm too disabled. So go slow, be patient. Tell this client that it took you a long time to get in the shape you are in. It's going to take you a while to get out of that shape. And I can promise you, Dr. Bortz is a nice resource for people to look at if they're interested with older adults. What you do today will determine your tomorrows. So you can have the fatty burger and sit on the couch, or you can get up and maybe have a healthy lifestyle and do something that's going to help you get fitter. You're probably not going to ever regroup. You're never probably going to be as fit as you were in your 20s and 30s, but you can sure be better than you were yesterday.
So what trends or innovations in fitness are you most excited about when it comes to older adults?
I guess I'm a curmudgeon, but I like what you said. Go back to the basics. You don't have to buy this new fancy vibrating machine that's going to supposedly rebuild your bone density, improve your balance. Do the stork stand, walk heel toe. I guess maybe I'm not innovative, but look at the basics, and you can do all those things without fancy, crazy equipment that's going to end up being in the closet, taking up valuable space.
See, I think that's the current innovation and trend is getting back to the basics. We're hopefully getting away from a lot of the BS that has crept into the fitness industry. And we're starting to, hopefully for the older adults, to realize that, the basic exercises that they could have done back in the Charles Atlas days are still things that they can do now. It just might be that intensity that they could do back in their 20s might not be the same that they can do in their 60s, 70s, or 80s. But intensity is relative, so hard lift, if the Labrador puppy is heavy for you, that's okay. Lift heavy, lift him tomorrow. He's getting heavier every day. It's still heavy for you, but you're getting stronger. And at the end of the training period, you're a stronger person. And, intensity is still the same,
Well, maybe
80% of your max.
Maybe the answer is follow the money. It's funny. There's a commercial down here in California, about this new gym. They've got brand new equipment. Well, from the commercial, it looks like the same old Nautilus equipment, just with a different name and a different color handles or something. So I'm with you. Make it fun. Make it something that I want to do tomorrow, because and that's the key. If you don't want to do it, you're not going to. The best programming, and again, someone who's written up exercise programs for the VA guys when they were leaving, I'd write up thousands of programs. A discharge program I'd write, and I know exactly what happened to those programs. They're sitting in the top shelf of someone's drawer that maybe never opened until they have to move again. So, I mean, yeah, you can write a program, but make it something that they do. It's better to give them 3 exercises or your basic 5 that you suggest than 15 exercises. Just prove how smart and how many exercises I can make up to do.
Yeah. There is, we just had a recent guest on, Kadrick Bloomquist, who works with a company called Relaxant, and they have some products that, again, it's going to be a little bit out of the reach of, the home gym owner for sure, but it's finding its way into more YWCAs and other gyms. But they have some pretty cool equipment that works on neuroreactive training. That's great for young people, athletes, older adults, all the same. They have like a treadmill that, rather than just going up and down in a one plane, it goes side to side. It moves more frequently, so you have this variable movement of the plane that you're walking on. And so you have, these constant perturbations that are causing you to have to react and strengthen your muscles and learn to respond to changes in the walking surface. And I think that's really an awesome thing, potentially for older adults to be walking on, even younger individuals, because we get on the treadmill and we walk. Natural walking is not like a treadmill,
Right.
and so doing something, and they do other exercises where they go from the base up and from the top down, where they'll do some exercises where you're like squatting with these water filled weights that are on either side of the barbell. And so it causes you to have to control that a lot more. And I think that's a pretty neat innovation. But again, getting back to the basics is going to be just as good, just learning to get stronger. We have a principle that we picked up from one of my early interviews. Was a guy, Carmine Arpea, who just recently retired, is the director of fitness for Peconic Landing, which is a continuous care retirement community on Long Island. And in his work there, they had a principle or a law that his coworkers started referring to as Carmine's Law. And I actually published it in my Pathophysiology and Exercise book. So it now became an official law. But Carmine's Law states that strength plus posture equals balance. And a lot of times when we focus on balance, we're looking at just practicing balance as opposed to developing balance. And, like you said, we tend to work on those front muscles. We bench press, we arm curl all the time. We don't work on the upper back. We become kyphotic. We're shifting that center of mass forward in our base of support. So we're more likely to fall. But if we can build up our back, straighten ourselves up, walk more uprightly, we're improving that posture. We're improving our strength. Our balance is going to improve.
Well, Jeff, you read my mind. We have a little place down in town. It's called Capitola, and we take the dog and we walk to the beach. And we have 2 routes. We can either take the sidewalk, or there's a railroad track. And so that railroad track really fosters dynamic balance. It's walking on the ties, avoiding limbs and so forth. So yesterday the tide was way out, and so we took the dog down to the water. And when we'd gotten to get to the water, I had to go over all kinds of rocks. And I go, what a great balance activity. Yeah, I was like a kid. I got to go from that rock to that rock. I had to do motor planning. Okay, which rock's going to slip? And how to avoid the little kids on the beach with the dog that's pulling me left and right. I mean, that was your machine you're talking about in
Yeah,
real life.
absolutely.
And if people would go out and walk, I'm not just a fan. I fortunately live in California where the weather is beautiful, but maybe go outside and walk in the grass that's uneven and so forth. So do everything you talked about that machine did, but maybe get out in nature, because we don't go. I mean, as I've always laughed at when I used to go to the gym and everybody's riding the stationary bike and they're walking on the treadmill and it's 75 degrees outside and beautiful air. Again, getting outside, breathing air, doing the mind body thing while you're walking is a good way to do it if you can.
Yeah, how many people hop in their car to drive to a gym to get on a treadmill?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I lived in the Bay Area, and there was Stanford was doing a study, and they looked at Lockheed engineers, and their job was, and I love the way they set up this study. They said, "Okay, you're going to get in your car and drive to the gym. If the gym was within 5 miles, there was a greater way." So they were told, "Okay, you're going to drive to the gym, drive around the parking lot, and leave for week one." And so it was like, then the week 3 and 4, you go to the gym, park in the parking lot, go in the gym, say hello to the front desk, come out. So it became a habit. So it wasn't like, oh, wow, I got to now go to the gym. And after like a month, they were told they could go in and start exercising. So it's got to become a habit and something you enjoy to make it happen. The other thing that's funny, because I was involved with designing a gym at this retirement community, and the big hot button at the time was Kaiser equipment. If you remember, it
Oh
was
yeah.
it was air. And so, and again, I lived in the Bay Area where all these engineers. So this was the most exciting thing for them. They go, we got to. So they equipped the whole place with this Kaiser equipment. People just did not like it because turning the knob to get 11 pounds was not as easy as going to the dumbbell that was 11 pounds. It was just interesting. And then they discarded all that expensive equipment and just went with basic machines and pulleys. So it's just interesting how these fads come and go, and
Oh
people
yeah.
really don't gravitate towards them.
Yeah, I think we should have just stuck with the selector pin model that Jack LaLanne gave us many decades ago.
Oh, exactly. My
Yeah.
universal gym that we had in every high school.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my high school went from we had a universal gym to I think it was a Paramount unit that was it was similar except it was bilateral, and it had the way it was structured as it moved up the rods that would the weights would travel on, it got tighter, so the weight actually got harder as it went up, which
Interesting.
was reasonable. But then as soon as I graduated, they ended up buying equipment from a failed Nautilus gym and
Uh-huh.
had a full Nautilus circuit, and then they ended up adding some free weights, and they had a beautiful gym by the time I was done with college, but not while I was in school.
It's funny you say. You remember there was and I don't know if it was Nautilus or who, but they had this variable resistance machine that was just a weight stack, but it had a cam that was off centered. So as you start out early and it got heavier, I don't see that anymore, but that was quite popular at a time.
Yeah, when I was in high school, my friends used to call me Captain Nemo because I was really pro Nautilus. I worked as a trainer at a Nautilus gym, and that really set me up to be a much better exercise physiologist because I learned a lot more about the physiology of the muscle contraction. I learned what it should feel like to move through that range of motion, and I had the owner of the gym there was Steel City Nautilus in Pittsburgh. It was this guy Biz Stark, and he had done some strength coaching at Pitt and some of these other areas before really strength coaching, was a big thing. And they had a machine there, it was called the hip and back. It was for the lower back and the upper hamstrings. And you'd lay on your back. You had two kind of movement arms under your knees, and you'd push your legs out, straighten it out, contract those back muscles, your glute muscles, and your upper hamstrings, and you'd have to hold one leg down, bend the knee, bring the other leg back while keeping the other leg down, and then bring it down, have them both meet without raising that other one. And it took a lot of a lot of control to be able to do that exercise properly. And of course, as a young teenager, I wanted to keep adding weight to it, getting stronger and stronger. And Biz was constantly coming up to me. He's like, and they always labeled it by letter rather than number. And it's like, the Miami Dolphins have this machine, and nobody on that team is using more than H. And I was like on J. So my form would get good for a while, and then it'd start getting bad. One day he's like, "Hey, Jeff, if you are not going to do this machine correctly, my business is dependent upon people getting results. And if you're not getting results, then you're hurting my business. So I'm happy to just give you your money back and send you home." No. And from that day on, and I worked several different gyms with Nautilus, after I got out of school, I could be across the room, back to a machine, and I can tell whether somebody was doing that machine correctly or not, just by the sound of how they were moving.
Excellent.
And it was
And
one of the best things.
you made an excellent point. It's form, and it's you know perfect posture. It's better to do it perfectly and with 5 pounds than 50 pounds. You're right, but
Right.
it's a hard message to get across. when you look around the room, everybody's going, "What's that old guy doing over there with only 5 pounds on his?" But and it has taken me a long time to understand the importance of perfect posture. You're right.
Yeah. And Biz had a great technique for, getting us to correct our form. My other buddy, Danny, he was doing that machine wrong too. And he took out a Sharpie pen. He said, every time you do it wrong, I'm going to put a mark on your leg. Dan went home that day with this big, huge black splotch on his leg. He learned to do that machine correctly.
And see, that guy was a great trainer. The guy,
Yeah.
to get you guys to really look at form, because what's the old saying? Form follows function,
Yep.
and so that's perfect.
Yeah. If you can do it right and then you can add on to it, you're just going to get stronger and better the whole time.
Yes.
So we probably touched on this a little bit, but can you elaborate a little bit more on what you're doing personally to age well?
First of all, you're making a big assumption, right? Okay. But I now have come to the point of I need to exercise for the health of it. So when you're a high school kid, you're exercising for the aesthetics of it. You're doing it to look good. And then when you get to be 40, 50, 60, you do it for the health of it. I'm also trying to now do it for the function of it. And all the things you're saying are resonate with me. My little home gym on the wall. It's still a temptation when I'm doing tricep extensions. Oh, I want to put some more weight on it. So what I try to do is I exercise daily. I'm a little neurotic about that. I try to cross train, whether it's bike, something for aerobics, or walk the dog. I also exercise with my little bands, my exercise bands, since I don't have a really heavy machine. But water exercise and swimming. Water exercise has kept me from many back surgeries because I go in there, I decompress my spine. So I try to cross train, like get my leg. We've been doing a lot of walking. My legs were a little tight. So today I'm going to make sure I go out and ride the bike. Um, and then the other thing I try to do is follow the 80-20 rule. And I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but 80% of my time, I try to do something that's healthy for me. And since I live out here in wine country, I've drank more wine since I've turned 60 than I did the first 60 years of my life. And then, because you can't be a Spartan, you can't just say, I'm just going to sit here and eat kale salads all day when the person next to you is eating a smash burger that looks so much better. So I try to follow that 80-20% with rather exercise, and I try to blend exercise into my lifestyle. So, and don't let my wife hear this, but so what we do is at the beach, we walk to the beach and have a coffee and a croissant. Now tell me we've probably negated any of the benefits of the walking, but again, there's the light at the end of the tunnel. There's a coffee and a croissant waiting for us there. So I really try to do what I said is what I do today should help me tomorrow. And and as now that I'm 73 years old, things are a little. When I was young, when I was 20 teaching, and I go, there's no difference between being 50 and 70. Well, there is. I hate to say that. I don't. I'm negating everything I've said so far. The ladders are climbing a ladder, which old people shouldn't be climbing ladders, but I'm still silly enough to climb that ladder. On my balance taking down Christmas lights was not what it was a couple years ago. So you just got to be mindful of certain changes that do occur with aging and be alert to it. Not think you can still do what a fit 20, 30-year-old does. So
I do get a little bit bothered sometimes by our profession when we base all of the expectations on aging on the norms. Like I was just teaching, I think it was last term, I was teaching my exercise testing and prescription class, and I put up the normative data for the bench press, which I'm not a big bencher. I'd prefer more pulling exercises than I do pushing exercises just for, function and health and everything else. But, it says that when I'm 20, if I'm benching my body weight, I'm in average shape. But now that I'm in my 60s, if I bench my body weight, I'm like superhuman. And I'm like, that should not be the case.
yes,
There's no reason why we can't maintain. We're not going to maintain everything, but we should maintain enough of it that, 60, 70, 80 is not what we have in our mind of what it should be. We should be a lot more advanced than the others. And so that's my goal.
It might be fun for you to share with your students is the book that Jesse Jones wrote and with Dr. Rickley. It shows they did age groups, and they did like those tests that we talked about, and they gave some norms of how many push-ups should someone do, and it's just fun. And maybe they're built on the wrong demographics, but it's just an interesting thing to see. So yeah, it might be just fun to add to your testing prescription class, just to let students see what they think, and let them
Yeah.
do a field test and go out in the field and see what mom and grandpa can do if they fit within these parameters.
I was over the last 3 years, I coached strength and conditioning for a local high school wrestling team. And I always loved to, we had dumbbells that went up to 100 pounds. And there was one day when the students was, doing their really poor form on their dumbbell rows. So I grabbed 100 and said, no, this is how you need to do it. And they're looking at me like, you can pull the hundreds? And I said, how many reps do you think you can do? Can you do like 10 reps? And I said, no, I can do 20. I cranked out like 22 reps for them.
Yeah.
And they're like, wow. It's like, well, see, you guys got to work it up because you're not, as fit as an old guy.
It's
And I
funny
did
you
like,
say that, because when I was teaching between classes, I had some young students, and I was about your age at the time. We did a pull-up contest, and it was just amazing that I could do as many pull-ups or more than some of these 20, 21-year-olds. It was just funny. They were shocked.
yeah, well, I'm still trying to do that with my students. 61 right now, going on 62. I want them to be somewhat in awe that, okay, wow, you can still stay fit at,
Yeah.
at Armstrong's age,
Yeah.
So,
No, that's great. Congratulations.
yeah. So let's see. Is there anything we've missed?
Again, I think you've done a fabulous job of asking all the right questions. I'm sure I've gone off on tangents that you weren't expecting. But yeah, I
No,
think
that's okay.
if your students are looking for something practical, because again, we teach a lot of theory in my little books that you know, when I stopped going to professional conferences, because as who speaks at conferences, everybody's out in the audience is smarter than you, and they want to they ask you the questions that got you. So I stopped. So I started aiming towards more the lay public. So those books that I've written with Ulysses Press and this recent one are designed for the lay person, for the average lay person. Like, I have a book on shoulder exercises, hip book, but the publisher, not me, did a great job of doing pictures that blend with a simple, basic description. So if your students are going to go out and work with older adults, it's a good little practical hands-on. They're through Ulysses Press. I think we did about 17 of them, and then this recent one with strength training for the seniors. And it's funny, one podcaster didn't want me to be on their show because the book was called Seniors. She was very offended by the word seniors. So,
Yeah.
I jokingly, because I was wanted to poke her in the tummy on this one, I go, I'd rather be a senior in high school than a freshman. I'd rather be a senior VP of a company than an incoming accountant. So I don't see senior as a pejorative term, but she found it an offensive term.
Yeah, we did an episode once on that about, how people take certain terms and labels used in aging as negatives, and what do we call older people? And it's too muddied. You're never going to satisfy anybody.
Yeah. So well, thank you for including me. I appreciate it. And if I can ever be help to your students or anything, you know how to reach me. I'm always available to help any way I can.
Well, our listeners and viewers might not know how to reach you. So how can our listeners and viewers find your book? How can they connect with you? Do you have a website, social media?
No, I really don't, because I do
You're
have
one of those seniors.
Yeah. I do have Facebook, but again, my books have all been published through Ulysses Press, and they can look it up. I think I'm on LinkedIn as well. They can see some of the things I've done. And then also, this latest book was by a sidebar of Ulysses Velko, and so they can look at it. And if they want to reach me, I'm sure they can get through you and then give me a call. I'm still would like to be relevant to people if I can help. If they want a historian, what do they say? A prophet is a historian looking backwards.
Okay. So what message do you want to leave as we wrap up this episode for seniors who feel discouraged and uncertain about their fitness journey?
As we said earlier, exercise for the health of it. What you do tomorrow will determines your tomorrow. And it's never too late to feel great. A good resource for some people might want to look at is Dr. Walter Bortz's books. He's written some really good books. He was a clinical professor at Stanford University, and he was very enlightening. He's charming to listen to, but And one of the other ladies that I worked with, I was very fortunate that the college I worked at was on the backside. It was a junior college on the backside of Stanford, so they'd always invite me down there to be involved. And Dr. Kate Lorick said, I think, aim for the ideal, but be real. We're not all going to look like Jeff. I can go to the gym every day and I'm not going to look like Jeff, but know what my capabilities are. It's to go within your capability. Because, as you look at a professional football team, there are linebackers. They have a different body than a lineman, a wide receiver. So again, you can't expect a tortoise to turn into a gazelle. And we just got to stay within the parameters of what our genetic predisposition is too.
True. It's like Per Olaf Astrand said, if you want to be an elite athlete, choose your parents wisely. Well, some of us didn't choose as wisely as others, but we can still improve ourselves.
Exactly. Great.
Well, Dr. Knopf, I really appreciate your time today. This has been enlightening. It's fun to talk with another exercise physiologist. And I just thank you for your books and the work you've done and are doing, and just keep aging well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.